Welcome on board, chosen one. Look at you carrying a set of people who never warmed to you and never told you why when you met them, when something was already wrong in the first 4 minutes, when you spent the following years being slightly careful around somebody who had decided about you before you'd opened your mouth. Look at what they arrived holding. Look at who put it there. Look at what it actually said. Hit that like button and subscribe to pay this energy back and push this message to every chosen one who's spent years looking for a cause that was never there. Here's what's been happening, and it will explain a specific face immediately. There are people who were cold to you from the very first minute. Not after something, before anything. Before you'd done a single thing that could have caused it. Before you'd said more than 2 sentences to them, before there was any material for a judgment of any kind. You've spent years looking for the cause, because coldness normally has one, and this kind never does. Nothing happened between you, no incident, no misunderstanding, no moment where it turned. It was simply there from the beginning, and it has never fully lifted. Here's what you've never once considered. Those people arrived already holding a description of you. Somebody had told them about you at length before you met, not in passing, and not as a formality. Properly, with detail in it, in the way people only bother to do about somebody they rate. And what they were told wasn't bad. That's the part that takes a moment. The description was favorable. In a couple of those cases it was extremely favorable, delivered by somebody whose opinion carried weight, in terms that made you sound like somebody it would be worth meeting. And that is precisely what did the damage. There was a time when you'd have found this hard to believe. You've assumed that being well spoken of can only help. Everybody assumes that. It's one of the most reliable pieces of common sense there is, and it's wrong in one very specific situation. Nobody can be as good as a description. Not you. Not anybody who has ever lived. Descriptions have no ordinary moments in them. No tiredness, no distraction, no boring middle. They're a summary of somebody's best effects, delivered without any of the flat stretches. And a person who arrives holding one doesn't meet you. They audit you. They spend the whole first encounter measuring, without ever framing it that way, and they come away with a small unresolved disappointment they can't trace and would never mention to anybody. That disappointment is the coldness. It arrives in the first meeting. It never gets examined by anybody, and it becomes the permanent setting of a relationship inside about 4 minutes. It has been sitting there ever since. And it has nothing to do with anything you did, because you never had a chance to do anything. And hey, chosen one, yes you, drop a comment with the number 777, not for superstition, not for good fortune, as a signal to the universe that you're finished searching yourself for a cause that was never in you. Because there's a particular kind of person who stays to the end of a message like this one. Most people scroll off the second it stops flattering them. If you're genuinely built for this, you'll feel the pull to stay to the very last word, and one specific face has already arrived. Now let's go through it step by step. And before we go one step further, understand how this stays standing. There's a link in the description. It's sitting in the pinned comment at the top as well, so you don't have to go hunting for it. That link is the only reason these messages keep getting made. It's held open by chosen ones who decided this work was worth protecting. If this is already doing something in your chest, that's your answer. Support it if you're able. Share the channel if you're not. Both carry the same weight here, and nobody is keeping score. Hit like so this stops getting buried, subscribe so you never have to find your way back to it, and send this channel to one person who's been carrying something heavy in silence. Now, step by step. Number 1. Coldness needs a cause, and you've never been able to find one. The absence of a cause is the clue. You've been treating it as the mystery. Chosen one, let's open this properly, because you've been searching in the wrong direction for years. Ordinary dislike has a history. Somebody was rude to somebody, or somebody's interests conflicted, or something got said. You can usually find it if you look, and once you've found it, you can stop looking. What you've been dealing with has no history at all. You've gone back to the beginning several times and there's nothing there, because the beginning is where it already was. Imagine this, the first meeting, you being perfectly pleasant, doing nothing unusual, and something in the other person already being slightly withheld before you've exchanged anything. Imagine this, you noticing it at the time and assuming you'd catch up, and never catching up across years. Or picture somebody arriving at a restaurant that has been recommended to them too enthusiastically and being faintly unimpressed before the menu arrives. And maybe you're wondering, couldn't it just be that they didn't like my face? Instant dislike on no information exists, and it's rare, and it doesn't hold for years. What holds for years is a comparison, running quietly, against something the person brought in with them. Duration is the tell. Nothing sustains a decade without something structural underneath it. You didn't cause it. There was nothing available to cause it with. You weren't disliked on sight. You were compared on sight. You didn't fail to make an impression. You arrived after one had already been made. And what has that fruitless search cost you? A permanent low-grade suspicion about yourself. Imagine this. Every time it happens, you go looking and you find nothing, and instead of concluding that there's nothing there, you conclude that whatever it is must be invisible to you. Imagine this, that conclusion accumulating across several people and several years, until you're carrying a settled belief that there's something about you that certain people can detect and you can't. Where has that belief been showing up? In how you enter rooms with new people. In a small extra care you take that other people don't. In the way you brace slightly when meeting somebody who came through a mutual acquaintance. You're not carrying an invisible flaw. You've been inferring one from an absence. You're not hiding something from yourself. There's nothing to find. You're not the problem in those meetings. You arrived after the problem did. There's no cause because there was no event. That's the clue. And there's something about the first meeting worth understanding. You had no idea it was an audit. Imagine this. You walking into that first encounter completely relaxed, with no reason to be anything in particular, having a perfectly ordinary exchange. Imagine this. The other person conducting an assessment throughout, silently, against a standard you didn't know existed. Imagine this. Both of you leaving with completely different accounts of what had just happened. Yours being that you'd met somebody, theirs being that they'd checked something and it hadn't quite come out. Two people, one event, two entirely different activities, and only one of them knew what was going on. Number two, they arrived already holding a description of you. Somebody briefed them, not maliciously and probably not deliberately. Chosen one, this is the mechanism, and it happens constantly everywhere. Before somebody new meets you, somebody who already knows you says something. It's normal. It's how anybody prepares anybody for anybody, and it happens in every workplace, every family, and every group of friends there has ever been. Most of the time it's brief and it evaporates. Occasionally it's substantial, and substantial descriptions don't evaporate at all. Imagine this. Somebody saying, before you arrive, that you're the one who really understands this, or that you're the person everybody goes to, or that if anybody can sort it out, it's you. Said warmly, meant entirely, delivered by somebody who likes you. Imagine this. The listener storing that and building an expectation out of it and carrying that expectation into the room where they meet you. Or picture somebody being handed a set of glowing particulars before viewing a house. So you might be asking, is that really enough to affect a decade? The first meeting decides a great deal more than anybody admits, and a first meeting conducted as an audit almost never recovers. Once somebody has formed a small private disappointment about you, every subsequent encounter gets read through it, and nothing you do afterwards is being assessed on its own terms. You weren't meeting them fresh. Nobody meets anybody fresh. You weren't starting from zero. You were starting from somebody else's summary. You weren't being judged on that first meeting. You were being reconciled against an account. And there's a version of this you can almost catch in real time. Watch the first 60 seconds of a new introduction. Imagine this, meeting somebody through a mutual contact and something in their opening being slightly off, a fraction too formal or a fraction too keen, or a small pause where an ordinary reaction should be. Imagine this, that being the sound of somebody reconciling. They're not being strange with you, they're comparing live, and the comparison takes a moment of their attention that would otherwise have gone into the conversation. Have you noticed that before? Almost certainly, and you've read it as them being a bit awkward. It's the most detectable moment of this whole mechanism, and it lasts about a minute, and after that it goes underground for years. You're not meeting an awkward person. You're meeting somebody mid-reconciliation. You're not off to a bad start. You're in the 60 seconds where the audit runs. You're not being received coldly. You're being checked briefly against an account. Somebody briefed them. That's where it started. Hold here for a second. Chosen one. You're well past the point where most people scroll away. That says something about what you're actually looking for. If this is reaching you, keep the signal alive. The support link is in the description, and it's pinned at the top of the comments, so it's never more than one tap away. Every contribution that comes through it pays for another message like this one, for somebody who hasn't found their way here yet. Not everyone can give. Nobody here is asking you to. Sharing the channel costs nothing and travels further than money ever does. So take whichever one is yours, like the video, subscribe. Pass this channel to someone who needs to hear that they weren't imagining it. Back to it. And there's a detail about who does this that narrows it down. It's almost always somebody senior to you. Imagine this, a description delivered by a peer. It carries almost no weight, and it evaporates within a week, and nobody builds an expectation out of it. Imagine this. The same words from somebody with standing. Now it's a briefing. Now the listener stores it because information from a person with standing is worth keeping. That narrows your list considerably. Whoever caused this had enough standing for their word to be worth holding and enough regard for you to spend it, and both of those are worth knowing about somebody. Number 3, the description was good, which is what created the problem. Good. That's the part that inverts everything you've assumed. Chosen one, this is the counterintuitive center of it, so stay with it. A bad description is survivable. Somebody who arrives having been warned about you is watching for something specific, and when it doesn't appear, they revise upward within about a month. Negative briefings correct themselves constantly because reality keeps failing to confirm them. A good description has no correction mechanism at all. It can only be disappointed. Imagine this. Somebody told you're brilliant, meeting you on an afternoon when you're tired and distracted and have nothing interesting to say. Nothing has gone wrong. You're simply an ordinary person having an ordinary afternoon, and a small gap opens between what they were told and what's in front of them. Imagine this. That same person, if they'd been told nothing at all, having a perfectly pleasant time with you and forming a mild positive impression. Or picture a song somebody has been told is extraordinary, heard for the first time on a bad speaker, and maybe you're wondering, isn't that unfair on me? Completely, and there's nobody to be angry at. The person who described you was doing you a favor. The person who received it was behaving normally. You were being yourself. Every participant acted reasonably, and the outcome is a decade of unexplained coolness. And that's the shape of a great many things. You weren't undersold. You were oversold by somebody kind. You didn't fail to meet a standard. You were measured against a compression. You weren't disappointing. You were ordinary against a description with no ordinary in it. And there's a general rule here worth keeping for everything. Anything praised in advance can only lose. Imagine this: a film, a restaurant, a person, a job. Every single one of them performs worse when preceded by enthusiasm, and the effect is enormous and completely reliable. Imagine this: the same things encountered with no advance information, being received well and remembered fondly. Why does nobody account for this? Because praising something in advance feels generous, and the cost lands on the thing being praised rather than on the person praising it, and the person praising it never finds out. You're not the only casualty of enthusiasm. Everything praised in advance takes the same hit. You're not being treated unfairly. You're subject to a general effect. You're not a special case. You're the ordinary victim of a completely ordinary kindness. The description was good. That's exactly what did it. And there's a reason this is worse than an ordinary bad start. Ordinary bad starts get overwritten. Imagine this: you meeting somebody badly for a real reason and then having 20 good encounters afterwards. The bad first meeting gets buried under the weight of the later evidence. That happens constantly, and it's why nobody should worry much about a poor first impression. Imagine this kind not getting overwritten because there's no event to bury. There's only a standing expectation, and standing expectations aren't affected by evidence at all. That's the actual cruelty of it. Everything you know about repairing a bad start works, and none of it applies here, and nobody has ever told you that there are two kinds. Number 4, they've been checking you against it since the first minute. The audit didn't stop. That's why it hasn't warmed. Chosen one, this explains why time hasn't helped. You've assumed that people who don't warm to you at first will warm eventually, given enough exposure. That's true for almost every kind of first impression. Time fixes nearly everything. It doesn't fix this because the comparison never ends. Imagine this: somebody who has a version of you in their head that they were given, and who meets the real you at intervals over years, and who runs the comparison every single time without ever being aware of it. Imagine this: every ordinary interaction being scored against a summary. You saying something unremarkable at a meeting is fine, unless there's a description in the room saying you're the one who always cuts through it, in which case unremarkable registers as a shortfall. Or picture somebody watching a support act after an introduction that oversold them. So you might be asking, wouldn't the description fade eventually? It doesn't fade because it's never tested directly. Nothing you do can disprove it or confirm it. It just sits there as a standing expectation, being quietly missed in every encounter forever. Anything checked directly gets confirmed or corrected. This one only ever gets measured against. They're not being cold to you, they're being disappointed at you repeatedly on a schedule. They're not withholding warmth. They're running an audit that has no end date. They haven't decided against you. They keep arriving at the same small gap. And there's a specific frustration in this you've felt without naming it. Your good days don't count with those people. Imagine this: a day where you're genuinely on form in front of somebody in this category. It goes well, and afterwards nothing has changed, and by the next meeting you're back where you were. Imagine this: the same performance in front of somebody who arrived empty, which would have permanently improved their view of you. Why doesn't it stick with the first person? Because a good day only confirms the description. It closes the gap for an afternoon, and it can't do anything more, because the description was already the ceiling, and matching a ceiling isn't an improvement. You can't win with that person by being good. Good was the expectation. You're not failing to impress them. You've been meeting a standard at best. You're not underperforming there. You're capped by something set before you arrived. The audit never stopped. That's why time hasn't touched it. And there's a small cruelty in the timing of it. The description gets delivered right before the worst possible moment to meet anybody. Imagine this: a first meeting, Everybody is slightly stiff, nobody is at their best, and the whole exchange is conducted in the least representative 20 minutes of anybody's month. Imagine this, a summary of your best years being tested against exactly those 20 minutes. Nobody would design it that way. It happens by default everywhere, because introductions and descriptions travel together, and the description always arrives immediately before the least favorable sample anybody will ever take of you. And there's one more thing about who gets hit hardest by this: quiet people. Imagine this, somebody loud and immediately impressive being described well in advance. They confirm it in the first 30 seconds, because their effects are visible instantly, and the whole thing resolves before anybody has time to compare. Imagine this, somebody whose effects are slow, who is only impressive over months in accumulated ways, in a manner nothing about a first meeting could ever reveal. Which of those two survives a glowing description? Only the first. And the second one gets audited on the least representative evidence available and comes up short every time, and there is nothing they could ever do about it. Number 5. Nobody can be as good as a description, including you. Nobody. That's worth saying flatly, chosen one. This is the part that should take the weight off, so let it. Every person who has ever been described well has had this happen. There's no version of anybody that survives being summarized. A description is made entirely of somebody's high points compressed with all the ordinary hours removed. You spend most of your life in the ordinary hours. Everybody does. That's not a failing, that's what a life is. Imagine this. The most impressive person you've ever known being described to you in advance in glowing terms, and then meeting them on an ordinary day. You'd be faintly underwhelmed. You would. Everybody is. Imagine this, that same person having no idea and going away wondering what they did wrong, exactly as you have. Or picture a book somebody was told would change their life, read on a train while tired. And maybe you're wondering, so was the description wrong? The description was accurate. That's the cruel part. Everything in it was true about you. It just described your effects across a long period, compressed into 30 seconds, and no single afternoon in anybody's life has ever contained that density. You weren't overrated. You were compressed. The description wasn't false. It was accurate and unlivable. You didn't fail to be who they said. Nobody has ever been who anybody said. And you've done this to somebody else, which is worth admitting. Somebody was described to you once. Imagine this, being told about somebody in glowing terms before meeting them and coming away thinking they were fine. Just fine. And carrying a small, unarticulated deflation about them ever afterwards. Imagine this, that person having been perfectly good on an ordinary day and having no idea they were being audited. Do you still hold that view of them? Probably, and it's probably wrong. And there's no way you'd ever have caught it from inside. That's the exact position everybody in this message is in, including the people who have been cold to you. You're not being wronged by people who do this. You do it too. You're not surrounded by unfair judges. You're surrounded by ordinary equipment. You're not the only one holding a wrong reading. You're holding at least one yourself. Nobody can be as good as a description. Not one person alive. And there's a question worth asking about how many of these you have. 2 or 3, that's the usual number. Imagine this, going through everybody you know and separating out the ones who were cold from the very first minute. It's a short list. Most people who dislike you did so after something, and those are ordinary and explicable. Imagine this, the short list being the entire subject of this message, and you having generalized from it to a belief about how you come across to everybody. How much of your self-assessment came from 2 or 3 people? More than you'd want to admit. Cold relationships take up disproportionate space because unresolved things always do, and yours have been generating a theory about you out of a very small sample. Number 6. The coolness is disappointment at a gap that was never yours to fill. It's disappointment. But it isn't disappointment in you. Chosen one, this distinction is the one to carry, so take it precisely. What they're feeling is real. There is a genuine unresolved something in them about you, and you've been reading it correctly for years. What it's attached to is not you. It's attached to a gap between two things, neither of which is your responsibility. Imagine this. Somebody holding a summary of you and an experience of you, and feeling the difference between them, and having no framework at all for understanding where that difference came from. Imagine this, them attributing it to you because you're the only visible party. The person who gave them the description is nowhere in the picture by then, and the description itself has become indistinguishable from their own expectations. Or picture somebody disappointed by a room that was described well, blaming the room. So you might be asking, is there any way to close the gap? Only by being better than you are permanently, in front of one specific person which isn't available to anybody. The gap isn't a shortfall in you. It's the difference between a compressed account and an extended reality, and it exists for every person who has ever been well described. They're not disappointed in you. They're disappointed by a difference. You're not failing them. There's nothing to fail at. You're not falling short. You're standing next to compression of yourself, and there's a specific behavior of yours to retire. The extra effort you make with those people. Imagine this, you working slightly harder in that relationship than in any other, being more prepared, more considered, more careful over years and getting nothing back for it. Imagine this, that effort being visible to them and reading as anxiety, and anxiety being the one quality guaranteed to widen the gap between you and any description of somebody impressive. What would happen if you stopped? Nothing bad, and possibly something good. The only version of you that has ever had a chance with that person is the relaxed one, because the relaxed one isn't visibly competing with anything. You're not obliged to work harder there. It has never once helped. You're not going to close it with effort. Effort is the wrong direction entirely. You're not failing to try hard enough. You've been trying too hard at the one thing where trying shows. The gap was never yours to fill. It isn't a gap in you, and there's something worth doing with one of those people. Meet them somewhere with no history in it. Imagine this, running into that person somewhere entirely outside the context you know them from. A queue, a train, somewhere neither of you expected. No roles, no audience, no reason for anybody to be anything. Imagine this, the conversation going surprisingly well for 10 minutes, and both of you being faintly surprised by it, and then reverting completely the next time you meet in the usual setting. Why does the neutral ground work? Because the comparison needs a context to run in. Take away the setting where the description was originally applied, and there's nothing to measure against for a few minutes, and what's left is two ordinary people. Number 7. The person who described you did it to help, and it cost you. Somebody was doing you a favor. That's the hardest part of this. Chosen one, this is where you'll want somebody to blame, and there isn't one. The description came from somebody who thinks well of you, almost certainly somebody who has helped you in other ways, who has spoken up for you elsewhere, and who would be genuinely upset to learn any of this. They were opening a door. That's what a description like that is for. And the door opened, and something else came through it with them. Imagine this, somebody saying good things about you to a new arrival, with real warmth, intending to give you a head start. Imagine this, those same words, arriving in a listener's head and hardening into a set of expectations, and being the reason that relationship never worked. Or picture somebody polishing something so highly that everybody who sees it afterwards notices the ordinary marks. And maybe you're wondering, should I ask people not to do that? You can't, and it would be strange, and it wouldn't work. Nobody can control what's said about them before they arrive anywhere. What you can do is stop looking for a villain in these relationships. There isn't one. in either direction, and the search has been costing you more than the relationships were worth. Nobody wronged you here. Somebody helped you badly. There's no malice anywhere in this. There's only a favor with an unpriced side effect. You weren't set up. You were praised in the wrong format to the wrong listener, and there's a question about whether you should ever tell them. Not the cold person, the one who described you. Imagine this, mentioning it lightly to somebody who has been generous about you for years. Whatever you said, it would land as ingratitude, and it would make them careful about speaking well of you in future. Imagine this, saying nothing, and them going on doing it, and some of those introductions working well and some producing another cold relationship. Is that a fair trade? On balance, yes, and it isn't close. The doors that opened outweigh the ones that jammed, and you've been counting only the jammed ones because they're the ones that produced people you see regularly. You're not being harmed on balance. You're paying a small cost on a large benefit. You're not owed a change in anybody's behavior. The behavior has served you. You're not going to raise this with anybody. It would cost you more than it recovers. Somebody was doing you a favor. It cost you a decade with one person. And there's a reversal worth noticing in the other direction. The people who were warned about you. Imagine this. Somebody who was told something faintly negative before meeting you. They arrive watching for it. And it doesn't appear because it was never true. And within about a month they've revised sharply upward. Imagine this. That revision producing a relationship considerably warmer than a neutral start would have, because you've been experienced as better than expected. Has that happened to you? Almost certainly, at least once, and you'll never know which relationship it was. Somebody in your life is unusually warm with you for exactly that reason, and neither of you has any idea. Number 8. The ones who arrived knowing nothing are your warmest relationships. Check this. It's the most verifiable thing in this message. Chosen one, this is where the whole pattern becomes visible, so do the check. Think about your warmest relationships, the people you're easiest with. Now ask in each case what they knew about you before they met you. Almost nothing in nearly every case. You'll find that they met you accidentally, or in a context with no introduction, or through somebody who said nothing much about you at all. Imagine this, somebody meeting you cold, forming their own impression from the actual material, and having nothing to compare you to. Imagine this, that person's impression of you being built entirely out of ordinary hours, which is what everybody's life is made of, and therefore never being disappointed by an ordinary hour. Or picture the difference between hearing a song by accident and hearing one after being told it's the best thing ever recorded. So you might be asking, does that mean I should avoid being introduced? Nothing in this is asking you to arrange anything. But you should notice the pattern because it explains something you've been carrying wrongly, which is a belief that some people just don't take to you, some people don't, and a specific set of people who don't were handed something before they arrived. Your best relationship started cold. That's not a coincidence. Your warmest people knew nothing about you. That's the whole variable. You're not better with certain personalities. You're better with people who arrived empty. And there's a subtler version of the same pattern, the people who knew a little. Imagine this. Somebody who was told one small thing about you before meeting you. Not a full description, just a sentence. That produces a mild version of the same effect, and mild versions are everywhere. Imagine this, a relationship that has always been slightly less than it should have been, with no coldness in it at all, just a small, persistent flatness you've never understood. How many of those are there? More than the outright cold ones. And they're less painful and more numerous, and they explain a whole category of relationships that never quite got going. You're not looking at two categories. You're looking at a spectrum. You're not only affected in the extreme cases. Most of this runs mildly. You're not dealing with a few bad relationships. You're dealing with a general effect at different strengths. The ones who knew nothing are the ones who stayed. Go and check it, and there's a possibility worth allowing for. Some of them may have warmed and you haven't noticed. Imagine this: somebody who has quietly recalibrated over 10 years, whose coolness has thinned considerably, and who you're still relating to as though nothing has changed because your own guard went up long ago and has never come down. Imagine this: both of you now maintaining a distance that only one of you is still committed to. Is that possible in your case? With at least one of them, probably. And the only way to find out would be to drop your own half of it for a few months and see what happens, which costs you very little and has never once been attempted. And there's a piece of self-knowledge available here that's worth more than the rest. You are a slow-acting person. Imagine this: everybody who has ever come to value you having done so gradually. Nobody has ever met you and been immediately taken with you, and you've read that as a deficiency for most of your life. Imagine this: that same quality being the reason the people who do stay permanently. Slow-forming impressions are the durable ones. Nothing that takes 4 minutes to form has ever lasted 20 years. You've been comparing yourself to fast-acting people your whole life. Different mechanism, different timescale, different result, and only one of the two has ever produced anything that held. Number 9, you can't fix it, because you'd have to be the description. There's no repair. Understanding that will stop you trying. Chosen one, this is the practical limit, so let's be plain. You've tried with that person, everybody does. You've been a bit more impressive around them at times, or a bit more careful, or you've made sure to be at your best in front of them specifically. Every one of those attempts is an attempt to close a gap by becoming the compressed version, and nobody can sustain that for more than an afternoon. Imagine this: you having one genuinely good encounter with them. Something goes well, you're on form, and for about a week something feels warmer. Imagine this: the next ordinary encounter resetting it completely, because the description is still there, and the gap reopens the moment you're merely fine. Or picture somebody trying to permanently be the best photograph ever taken of them. And maybe you're wondering, so I should give up on that person? Not give up. Stop trying to close something that can't be closed. You can be perfectly ordinary with them for years, and the relationship will be what it will be, and occasionally these things thaw for reasons nobody can identify. What you can stop doing is treating every interaction as a test you keep failing. You can't be the description, neither can anybody. You can't fix this by performing. Performance widens it. You're not failing at that relationship. You're competing with a summary. And there's one thing that does occasionally work. Somebody else describing you accurately later. Imagine this: a third person, years in, saying something about you to the cold one that undercuts the original description. Not praise, something ordinary and human. That she gets tired, that she got something badly wrong once. Imagine this: that landing, and the compressed version losing a little of its density, and the gap narrowing slightly for reasons nobody can trace. Does that ever happen? Occasionally, and never on purpose, and never because anybody was trying to help. It's the only known route, and it isn't available to you, because you can't ask anybody to undersell you convincingly. You can't correct the description. Somebody else occasionally erodes it. You're not without any hope in those relationships. You're without a method. You're not the one who can fix it. Somebody ordinary saying something ordinary might. There's no repair, because there's nothing broken in you. And there's a final picture worth putting up. Imagine this: a room years ago that you weren't in. Somebody speaking about you with real conviction to a person they wanted to have a good impression of you. Imagine this: that conversation lasting maybe 90 seconds and being entirely forgotten by both of them within a month. Imagine this: Those 90 seconds having shaped a decade of one relationship in your life in the wrong direction, without any of the three people involved ever being able to identify what happened. That's the whole thing. 90 seconds of generosity from somebody who wanted the best for you, running quietly against you ever since. Number 10. The coldness is a measure of how highly you were spoken of. That's the inversion. And it's the one to walk out with. Chosen one, this is the last one, so take it properly. Every cold relationship in this category is a receipt. Not for something you did wrong. For something somebody said about you when you weren't in the room. The colder it was, the better the description was. That's the actual relationship between the two, and it's exact. Imagine this. Going through your list of people who never warmed to you, and understanding each one as evidence that somebody spoke about you, at length, favourably, to a person whose opinion mattered enough for it to be worth doing. Imagine this, that having happened several times, somebody kept doing this for you. Repeatedly, in rooms you weren't in. Or picture a set of doors that opened slightly too enthusiastically, each one leaving a mark. So you might be asking, isn't that just a way of feeling better about being disliked? Check it against the evidence. These relationships have no origin event. They started cold, time hasn't moved them, and the people involved almost always came to you through somebody who thought highly of you. If all four of those are true, the description explanation fits everything, and the dislike explanation fits nothing. You weren't disliked by those people. You were preceded by a recommendation. You didn't lose them. You never had a clean meeting with them. You're not carrying evidence of being hard to like. You're carrying receipts for being well spoken of. And there's one last thing worth taking from this. Somebody has been advocating for you in rooms you weren't in. Imagine this, that being the actual headline of everything in this message, not the coldness. The fact that somebody more than once thought enough of you to spend their own standing describing you well to people who mattered. Imagine this, you having no memory of any of those conversations, no knowledge of who said what, and no way of ever thanking anybody for it. What have you been counting instead? The cost. Every time, for years, you've been counting the side effect and never once counting the act that produced it. You're not carrying evidence of being disliked. You're carrying evidence of being recommended. You're not looking at failed relationships. You're looking at the residue of somebody's generosity. You're not the subject of anybody's coldness. You're the subject of somebody's advocacy, and this is what advocacy occasionally costs. The coldness is the measure. That's the whole inversion. And now, chosen one, everything comes full circle. Go back to the beginning of this. Cold from the first minute, with no cause anywhere in the history. You've spent years searching for that cause. In your own behavior, in something you must have said, in some quality of yours that certain people can detect and don't like. Every search has come back empty, and every empty search has quietly reinforced the idea that the fault must be something you can't see. There's nothing you can't see. There's nothing there. Those people walked into the room already holding a version of you, given to them in good faith by somebody who wanted to help. And what they were holding was better than any ordinary afternoon with any ordinary person could possibly be, and the difference has been sitting between you ever since. Nobody's going to explain this to either of you. The person who gave the description has forgotten giving it. The person who received it can't identify what's underneath their own coolness, and you've been carrying it as evidence about yourself for years. What you've got is the pattern, cold from minute one, no origin event, never warmed, and in almost every case somebody in common who thinks the world of you. That's the signature. It isn't dislike, it never was. Imagine this, one of those people at some ordinary hour, feeling the same faint unresolved thing about you that they've felt for a decade, and having no more access to its cause than you do. Imagine this, both of you carrying identical confusion about the same relationship from opposite sides for years, and neither of you ever raising it because there's nothing raisable in it. Imagine this. The person who caused it that same evening, thinking warmly about you and having no memory of the conversation that did it. Stop looking for the fault. Nobody who arrived empty has ever been cold to you. Your rise isn't coming. It's been in the descriptions people gave of you before you walked in. If this message hit home, chosen one, like the video, subscribe, drop 77 in the comments, and share this with someone who spent years looking for a cause that was never there.